Alright, so today I'm going to do a quick review and then show you guys how to install the Techno toy tuning or T3 front control arms for the Z31. So these control arms are fully adjustable. You can adjust the control arm length to give you more camber. You can also adjust the ball joint height by stacking the spacers to adjust for any kind of roll center issues you have. So when setting the spacers for the ball joint, you have to be careful not to get the tie rod end and control arm out of alignment. And I can show you how to do that once I get them installed on the car. These also come with multiple holes for setting the tension rods. So if you have a high angle steer kit, then you can move the tension rod backwards to give you more clearance. It's good for a drift car. I don't need that for mine, but it's nice to have. And there's multiple holes for the sway bar end link. So that way you can set the sway bar end links without binding at any ride height. The powder coat and anodizing on the tension rods is perfect. They came in without a scratch on them. Welds look great. Definitely worth the money, even though they are a little bit expensive. The only complaint I have with these is the stacked washers on the heim joint on the end. I would have loved to see a spacer that was custom cut for these. Now on my car, I have control arms that have heim joints on them already. And when I did it back, I think it was 6 years ago now, I had spacers cut. So I'm going to swap these stacked washers and spacers that they have in there for the ones that I have because they'll fit into this heim joint. So I'm going to get the car jacked up and take a wheel off and start getting the old ones out and installing these. First thing, this jack is only under here just sitting there. The weight of the vehicle is on cribbing, so this is completely safe to get underneath. If anybody sees the jack and is wondering, it's just sitting there just to keep it out of my way. So I'm going to start by getting the tie rod out, taking the sway bar end link off. I'm going to be replacing the knuckles with a spare set that I have here, so I'll be using these on the new control arms. So I can keep the knuckles right on the ball joints and just take it off from the spacers there. So this should be fairly easy to pop out. Alright, so the tie rod ends out. Now we'll come in here and we'll get the sway bar end link out. Now I'm going to try for these two bolts under here. There's one and there's two. They should come right out with an impact. They haven't been in there very long. Looks like that ball joint's seen better days, but I won't be using that anymore anyway, so that's okay. Now that the coilover's out of the way, I only have to remove that bolt back there, and then this bolt here holding the tension rod in. And that whole tension rod and control arm assembly should come right out. Shouldn't take that much to pull it. Here's my setup that I had on my car. This would be an ASCO tension rod setup with homemade control arms. I built these probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. Basically just cut off the factory arm, added a threaded adapter, and then an adjuster here with a heim joint. These are the spacers that I had cut for my setup, and I will put them onto the new ones because it's just a standard heim joint that should fit no problem, and I like that much better than stacking washers. All right, let's get installing the new stuff. I'm trying to install the knuckle onto the tapered shaft. You can see here the taper sticks up past the end of the knuckle, and this won't allow the nut to fully seat down onto the knuckle and push the knuckle down onto the taper to get a tight fit. So I think this is a little bit of an oversight on their part. I'm probably going to stick a washer in there and then tighten it down that way. I think that's the only way I can get this to work. Let's see if you can see this. So the tapered shaft is not gonna press all the way down onto this taper, but it's just gonna go down enough to seat. But with that taper sticking up past the knuckle, there's no way that can actually do that. Let me see if I can find a washer that'll fit on there and then tighten that down. So I ended up having to take the stud out, put that in a vise, and I got that locked down there nice and tight with one washer. It does have a nylon locking nut, but it's got a hole for a cotter key, so I stuck one of them in there too just to make sure. That's not something I would like backing off, so extra safe is better, I guess. All right, let's start installing the tension rod for the first time. I don't know how long this is going to need to be. I'll take measurements afterwards. It's best to run the threads of the heim joint and the adjuster here all the way in and then adjust out, so that way you don't have the threads too far adjusted on one and not the other. This way it'll keep it even. Same with the tension rod. Adjust both heim joint and this rod end here all the way in. And then we can install this, and then we can hook the two together and figure out which hole it needs to go into the control arm and start adjusting it. I finally got it in there. Now we'll get this tension rod hooked up to the control arm. This one is too far forward, and the gonna have way too much caster, so we'll leave it like that. All right, so I'm gonna get my spacers. I use 2 of these bump steer spacers or roll center adjusters, whatever you want to call them. Some people don't use any. My setup, I like to have 2 on there. All right, so I got the control arm in. Everything looks good. There's nothing making contact. Nothing is tight yet, so I have to go back through and tighten everything down. The uniball that is in this, what would have been a ball joint, is really stiff, so it's getting everything lined up was kind of a struggle. But once I got it to start moving, it freed up, and I was able to get the control arm and the tension rod all in alignment. I have some quick measurements I took before I took this apart, so I'm just going to measure it real quick and get everything set to close, and then it's going to go to alignment rack and get done the right way. So for the spacers in the ball joint, you can stack these spacers to give it more or less height. But when you're doing that, you don't want to just do it at random. You want to make sure that the tie rod and the control arm are at the same angle and going through the same plane when the car is going straight. If you don't take that into account, you will get bump steer. All right, so I went through and I adjusted the adjusters on the backs of both the tension rod and the control arm, and I was able to get the wheel relatively close to where it was sitting before I started. So for now, I'm going to lock the adjusters down on both the control arm. There's 2 on the back side of the control arm, and there's 1 on each side of the tension rod, 1 here and 1 up there. We'll get them all locked down and do the final alignment on the alignment rack. Last thing I need to hook up on this side will be the sway bar, but I'm not going to do it till the other side is done, so that way I can get both sides perfect in the way I want them. All right, so I'm back working on this today. I've got both sides done. All the arms are locked down and tightened. So the only thing that's left to do now is the sway bar end links. So this is the sway bar end link they set with the kit. It's basically 2 female heim joints with a rod between them. So if I was to install the sway bar end link that they sent me, there's really no more room. There's a little bit of room for the sway bar to go up when the suspension compresses. So this is too long. The factory one, which I have around here, the factory sway bar end link is really short, so that would bring this down closer to the control arm. So what I had done was bought 1 male heim joint and screwed it into the female one that they sent me. This will allow the sway bar to have its range of motion when the suspension is compressed. It won't jam it into the body, and it more closely matches the height of a stock sway bar end link. It's a little bit taller, but it's not much where it's going to affect anything. All right, so everything's all on now. So the last thing I would like to check, and it's something that you probably should watch out for, is the ball joint sticks down. Looks like a little bit lower than what a factory ball joint would be. The factory control arms are cut at a slant, so that way it goes upwards towards the wheel bearing. Should be mindful if you have smaller wheels that could be an issue with these. So I have 17 350Z wheels, so we'll install this and make sure it fits, and that should be the end of it. You can see the bottom of the ball joint is, I'd say, about 1 inch away from the wheel. You could definitely get away with 16s. 15s might be pushing it. Overall, I do like this kit. I wish that the few minor problems that I have would have been worked out before they started producing them. I know it's hard to get parts produced for the Z31, so little issues like that I'm not really too concerned with. I'm going to leave the video here. I'm working on a couple other things on the car right now, so I can't put it back on the ground. But as soon as I get this outside and the salt's clear from the roads, I will get a review of actually driving it.